Good morning, and you are very welcome to Scale Ireland's first webinar of the year. My name is Martina Fitzgerald, and I am the CEO of Scale Ireland, and we're delighted to be joined by An Tánaiste Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, Leo Varadkar, this morning. Scale Ireland represents, supports and advocates on behalf of Ireland's tech, startup and scale-up companies. And to put that into context, there are currently 2,000 companies employing 47,000 people around the country. So the focus of this morning's event on the role of the sector in Ireland's recovery is of huge interest and importance to many people. And that is really borne out by the fact that hundreds of people are joining us for this event this morning. The response has been phenomenal. And I want to welcome all of you who have logged on, and in particular, the Tánaiste Leo Varadkar. Now, in terms of the response to this event, I think there has been a significant interest, and that's partly because of two main reasons. First of all, there's a strong belief that the sector will have a strong role in Ireland's economic future. In fact, recent research by Tech Ireland has shown that the vast majority of tech startup and scale-up companies are focused on exports. And this comes at a time when the OECD has pointed out that just 6% of Irish SME employer firms are focused or involved in exporting activity. Secondly, I believe there's huge interest in today's event because of the positive and collaborative nature of the sector, which we see time and time again in Scale Ireland. For instance, through the time and effort that founders, funders, experts, regional representatives give to our steering group and also to our Slack channel, which we will be officially launching shortly. We also see it through our membership of the Alliance for an Innovation-Driven Recovery with the IVCA, the HBAN, Euronext and Tech Ireland all coming together with Scale Ireland to provide sectoral solutions. And finally, we're witnessing it here this morning through the cooperation and support of the Irish Tech Hub Network, and in particular Dogpatch Labs, which has supported Scale Ireland from day one and is hosting us here this morning. And I would like to say that I've experienced this firsthand, and I would like to thank everyone for the warm welcome since I was appointed CEO of Scale Ireland last November. Now, in terms of today's format, I'm going to shortly hand over to Brian Caulfield, who is the chair of Scale Ireland, who will outline our objectives and goals, and also, most importantly, introduce the Tánaiste for his keynote address. After that address, we are going to have a panel discussion with two very successful founders, Bobby Healy, the CEO of Manna, Aero, and Claire McHugh, the CEO of Axonista. And the Tánaiste will be joining that panel discussion. Hopefully, there will be time for one or two questions at the end, and you can email your questions to luke@scaleIreland.org. And finally, the hashtag for today's event is hashtag Scale Ireland Startups, all one word. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to the chair and co-founder of Scale Ireland, Brian Caulfield, who many of you will know very well. He has been a leading advocate and a very effective one for the sector for almost 3 decades. Brian.
Thanks very much, Martina. I actually started my first business in 1992. So I'm nearly 30 years now founding, funding and mentoring startup technology companies. Back then, when I started the company, it was a bit of a shock to me to realize that even as I was cutting my income by 65%, that I was going to be treated much less favorably than other taxpayers as an entrepreneur. That was probably the moment that I first realized that startups needed to be much, much better represented. Thankfully, some of those issues have gradually been improved in recent years, but there remain lots of challenges. And indeed, Martin Fraser, the Secretary General of the Department of the Taoiseach, a man who's usually introduced as the most powerful civil servant in Ireland, once told us very, very directly, you folks are just very, very badly represented. When we want to talk to the farmers, we know who to call. When we want to talk to you, there's no one to call. And that was really why Liz McCarthy, Patrick Walsh and I decided to form Scale Ireland back in 2019. We wanted to ensure that Irish startup and scale-up technology companies had a voice, that they were being promoted and supported to reach their full potential. We wanted to make Ireland a leading location for startup technology companies, for innovation and entrepreneurship, in the same way as Ireland has become a leading location for foreign direct investment. I'm absolutely delighted with the response to today's event. It signals real momentum and positivity within and towards the sector, and the increasing recognition of the importance of the sector in an environment where our FDI model is increasingly challenged, and when we face the challenge of recovering economically from the COVID pandemic. And there is so much potential. Martina already mentioned the number of companies and people already working in startups in sectors as diverse as medtech, clean tech, e-commerce, and enterprise software. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things. Firstly, the impact these companies are having in supporting balanced regional development. There are 190 of these companies in Cork, 150 in Galway, 90 in Limerick. Smaller towns like Tramore, Gorey, and Killorglin are also generating startups with founders who are committed to growing employment and innovation in their hometowns. And each job in one of these companies typically supports up to 5 other jobs. Secondly, as a member of the government's recent SME task force, there was very significant discussion about the need to increase Ireland's SME export performance. As Martina pointed out, the companies that Scale Ireland represents are typically exporting from day one. Not only that, but in most cases, they're exporting high-value, environmentally friendly products, digital goods, medical devices, etc. Finally, I'd like to mention training and education. As the Tánaiste recognised in his interview on Primetime on Tuesday, many of the jobs lost in the pandemic may not return. Yet technology startups and scale-ups offer great jobs and are crying out for skills. There's a huge opportunity to connect those dots with appropriate training and education programs. So lots of potential. There are also many challenges that are all too familiar to startup founders. And I want to assure you that Scale Ireland is continuously engaging with government and other key stakeholders in relation to these. But this morning's event is about highlighting the opportunities and the hope for the future and discussing the plan to grasp those opportunities. With that, I'd like to thank the Tánaiste Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, Leo Varadkar, for joining us this morning, and invite him to give us his keynote address. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good morning, Brian, and thanks, Martina, and thank you to Scale Ireland for inviting me to take part in the webinar. Just want to begin, Martina, by wishing you the very best in your new role. Obviously, we've known each other for a long time as a political correspondent and also as an author. And I've no doubt that you're going to apply the same determination and professionalism to this new role as you did when you were working in journalism. So best of luck once again. I also want to acknowledge the enormous contribution of Liz McCarthy, your former CEO, in establishing Scale Ireland. And I think, as Brian said, you're a group of people that need to be represented well, and you have been represented well in recent years. I'm also really glad to have the opportunity to speak with you here today. I know the past year has been exceptionally difficult, and the impact of the COVID crisis on the startup and the scaling community in Ireland, and indeed globally, has been seismic. I have nothing but admiration for the many entrepreneurs across the country who've been brave enough to start up and scale up their businesses during a pandemic. And we know from history that businesses that survive and do well and start up in a recession tend to be very successful into the future. And I hope that's going to be true for many of your businesses too. And talking to people, I've seen lots of examples of all across the country of ingenuity, adaptability, resilience that entrepreneurs are known for the past year. Whether that's a company that usually manufactures uniforms, transforming the business to produce PPE, a restaurant adapting to takeaway and delivery services. Time and time again, I've been impressed with the way Irish businesses have risen to the challenge posed by COVID and having to deal at the same time with the effects of Brexit and the new trading arrangements which have taken place. For my part, as Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, my role, as you know, is to protect the lives and livelihoods of people, to lead our country through the public health crisis, but also the economic crisis which it's caused, one that will persist even when the pandemic has ended. For almost a year now, government has been putting in place policies to keep businesses afloat: wage subsidies, restart grants, low-cost loans, a commercial rates holiday, lower VAT, the pandemic unemployment payment, the COVID restriction support scheme, and most recently, the tourism continuity scheme and the COVID business aid scheme, which may be of benefit to some of you. And we're constantly looking at all of these measures and seeing what else we can do to help businesses as the situation evolves. Our objective has been to make sure that in terms of an economic crisis, that this pandemic turns out to be a lost year, or maybe even a lost year and a half, but not a lost decade. As well as helping businesses to survive, we also have schemes that you'll be familiar with operated by Enterprise Ireland to help companies to develop new products and services. So we must enable companies not just to recover, but also to grow and to position themselves to compete for new business opportunities. This work must continue and will continue. So with that in mind, last week I announced an additional 90 million euros for the Sustaining Enterprise Fund, bringing total funding up to 200 million euros. The fund ensures that eligible companies can accelerate their recovery. It provides funding needed to stabilise cash flow, adapt operations, and innovate for new customer needs. And we believe it will sustain up to 45,000 jobs in cities, towns, and villages across the country. For HPSUs, the Sustaining Enterprise Fund provides combined funding of up to 75,000 euros in the form of equity or similar investment up to 50,000 euros and a non-repayable grant of up to 25,000 euros. For small companies, funding of up to 50,000 euros is available, of which up to half is in the form of a non-repayable grant. The objective of this funding is to stabilise high potential startups, which understandably are facing enormous challenges in growing the sales revenues that were originally projected in more normal times. Local collaboration is also really important, and we're fortunate to have a strong network of local enterprise offices across the country. And I'm sure many of you here are familiar with your local LEO. You may also be aware that the National Digital Research Centre, the NDRC, will now be operated by Dogpatch Labs in partnership with hubs across the state. This is an exciting development, and we expect it will result in better services for all of you on the ground. My department also makes funding available for the development of new enterprise hubs, and I know how much of a lifeline these remote working spaces will be for you all, even after things return to normal, as we all get used to spending much less time in the office, which I think is going to be a good thing. One opportunity I'd like everyone to be aware of as well is the Competitive Start Fund. Up to 50,000 euros is available and is designed to accelerate the development of high potential startup companies. The most recent call for funding from this particular fund launched on the 9th of February, and it's open for a 3-week period, so there's no time to lose. The High Potential Startup Fund, also operated by Enterprise Ireland, is available as well, so it's in addition to this, and is targeted at startups with the potential to develop an innovative product or service for sale on international markets and create 10 jobs and 1 million euros in export sales within a 3-year period. In 2020, Enterprise Ireland worked with 80 high potential startups on a co-funded basis, and successive governments through Enterprise Ireland have invested in the venture capital sector over the last 30 years. I know how essential finance is for any business, especially for early stage companies. And for this reason, the Minister for Finance announced an additional 30 million euros in the budget to develop the VC sector. Enterprise Ireland continues to be the largest seed stage investor in all of Europe. And under the most recent seed and venture capital scheme, 2 calls for expressions of interest have taken place for 4 funds which have been established to date. This has leveraged additional capital to a total combined fund size of over 340 million euros, with Enterprise Ireland committing 60 million in total to these funds. The agency is working with startups, and this will be highlighted at Enterprise Ireland's Startup Showcase 2021, which is taking place on the 24th of February. This event brings together the many new companies which Enterprise Ireland has invested in during 2020, outstanding companies and founders who are making their mark. It's vital to have plans beyond COVID-19. I know that's difficult at the moment, but we have to have those plans so we can create the optimum long-term business environment for our startups, our scale-ups, and also the entire SME sector. Towards the end of last year, I chaired an SME task force, which developed a report setting out a long-term vision for our SMEs and entrepreneurs. And I particularly want to thank Brian for his excellent contribution and work as part of this task force as one of the subgroup members. We felt it was really important that the interests of high growth tech startups were reflected in the process. The SME's task force report, the SME Entrepreneurship and Growth Plan, was published by government last month and gives my department and government a clear set of recommendations directly from the business community on how to build the best business and regulatory environment for SMEs and entrepreneurs. A lot of the recommendations are designed to help high potential startups and scale-up companies, and these include strengthening the role of education and training to provide pathways for entrepreneurship. There are also recommendations to incentivize private investment into Indigenous tech startups and scale-ups by reforming the Employment Investment Incentive Scheme, the EIIS. And there are also proposals to motivate, incentivize and de-risk the exporter journey for SMEs and the development of bespoke intensive strategic programs for HPSUs. The report also puts forward some proposals on clustering and networks, which can drive innovation and growth through peer learning and productivity spillovers. While these recommendations are not yet government policy, they do give us a clear pathway forward for the next few years. And an implementation group led by my colleagues, Ministers Damien English and Robert Troy, will examine these recommendations in further detail. Its objective will be to work with departments and agencies across government to drive delivery of as many recommendations as possible. So to conclude, as you can see, there's a lot of help on offer, and government is reviewing what's available all of the time. I want to finish up by thanking all of you for your cooperation, your determination, and your resilience in the past year. Your businesses are the backbone of our economy, and you'll have a crucial role to play in Ireland's recovery by driving growth in exports, investment, regional development and employment. And I am confident that we'll bounce back and come out the other side of this pandemic stronger and better than we've ever been before. So thank you all for all you do, and I look forward to joining the panel discussion later and hearing from you further. Thanks very much.
Thank you for the kind comments, and also thank you for your support for the sector and for joining us here this morning. And you are going to join our panel discussion, and we're delighted to be joined by 2 very successful founders today. Many of whom will be known very well to you. Firstly, we're delighted to be joined by Bobby Healy, the CEO of Manna, Aero, a drone delivery service business, which has very ambitious international plans in terms of online food and pharmacy delivery. Bobby's company was the first to apply for the Irish Aviation Authority for a new EU drone operator certificate, which signifies his intention to bring his 3-minute low-cost delivery model to European households. And Bobby, of course, previously founded and sold Car Trawler, the world's largest mobility marketplace for airlines. You're very welcome, Bobby. And we're also joined by Claire McHugh, the CEO of Axonista, which is an interactive video technology company which enables video commerce for media companies and employs 35 people. Its customers include QVC, the Home Shopping Network, and Virgin Media Ireland. And Claire has also served as a member of the European Innovation Council jury, which awards EU grants to innovative SMEs. So you are both very, very welcome. And I know that the Tánaiste is now joining us for this panel discussion. Firstly, Bobby, there's a lot of excitement about what you're doing and interest in Manna Aero and its potential, especially after that application for an EU license. Now, you've already had terrific success, as I mentioned there. So can you tell us about how Manna Aero came about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, and thanks Tánaiste for being here. It means a lot to me as a startup founder that we get such great support from government. So Manna is what it says on the tin. It's a drone delivery service. You know, I was first sitting in my house in Rathfarnham, sitting in the back garden, and like any good Irish person, needing a bag of chips at a certain time of the evening, and finding that there's actually no way to get a bag of chips delivered quickly in Ireland, outside of Dublin city centre. So that's obviously a life-defining moment, when you can't get a bag of chips. And when you actually apply that problem and you look at it with an entrepreneur's perspective, that's a $250 billion industry to solve that problem, right? So you straight away go to the size of the prize here to solve that problem. You go to the technology of how do you fix, the situation where you have a human being that weighs 150 pounds in a 3-ton car producing CO2 to get a bag of chips to go 2 miles. And some fun facts: there's 850 million road trips a year just delivering products, just in the UK alone, delivering fast food to people's houses. So you look at the size of the market, you look at the technology to solve that, and unless you're crazy, you straight away come to drone delivery as a service, as a business. And I, like many of my counterparts in the startup world, we don't see the why not. We see, we don't see the why, we see the why not. And I started to build a team in Wales around solving that problem. Built an aircraft, designed one and built one, and sat down with the IAA at the time to see, look, if somebody did this, would it ever be allowed? Is there a world where you can use the airspace for logistics, lightweight, short range logistics? And the answer from the IAA at the time was absolutely. And we're blessed by, funnily, we have few advantages being in Ireland as a tech nation, because we're so disjointed in terms of geography and access to big funds, or big US funds. But one of the things that we have, or two of the things that we have in Ireland, are a fantastic system for testing in the aviation space. So we have a regulator that supports what we're doing, a regulator that's at the forefront of defining the regulations that enable our space to happen. And that's absolutely huge. And then on top of that, as people will have seen, the HSE got right behind us during the first lockdown and supported us in delivering pharmacy products straight to the consumers in Moneygall. And that was not a stunt, that was real, that was genuinely helping people that were suffering from lockdown in a small rural town, and it made worldwide headlines. We, since then, in the last 6 months, we've gone live with trials in Moneygall in Ireland, delivering everything from pharmacy to critical food supplies to the residents, the 10,000 residents of that town. And we're leading the world in drone delivery. Literally, Ireland is the #1 country in the world for drone delivery already. And that's something that we as a team are extremely proud of. And it's something that makes me say, you know what, we could actually build the biggest technology company Ireland has ever seen right here in the bog in the middle of Ireland. And there's a story about that, you can ask me on Twitter. But we have an opportunity here to, really continue to lead the space and take over what's going to be multiple hundreds of billions dollar industry. Our team are in Wales and in Dublin, and obviously in Oranmore. And we're 40 people today. We're backed by venture capital, both Irish venture capital companies and US venture capital companies. We've spent not far off $10 million so far, and we'll need then the rest 20, 30, $40 million of investment just to get this business to viable status. So Tánaiste, when I look at government policy in that regard, it's certainly an area where we're great at the small companies. As a big moonshot type of project, I'd love to see and hear your thoughts on how we do better, I think, with companies like us that need 3 or 4 years of investment before we get there.
And Bobby, you mentioned there you got VC investment. You've also got investment from Stripe, and there's a lot of excitement and potential about what you're doing in terms of your international plans. I know you can't go into the details for competition purposes, but what's the 5-year plan? How big do you envisage this becoming?
So we plan within 2 years to be scaling up manufacturing of our aircraft. So that means producing tens of thousands of aircraft. We have plans to expand in Ireland to another 2 or 3 towns in Ireland to reach about 50 to 100,000 people over the next 12 months. And similarly, we have plans in the next quarter to be in the United States in a town there of about 20,000 people. So from our point of view, the USA market is the biggest opportunity and the most cohesive one for us. But we want to do it all from here. We think we can build a platform here, the technology, the aircraft, and the manufacturing right here in Ireland. And we can export that and make that operational in any country in the world. So for us, we want to be starting to generate significant revenue in about 2 years' time and become profitable in 2 to 3 years' time. In 5 years' time, we expect to be the leader in the world doing what we do. And that means being very, very well scaled in the US and across Europe.
So that's a lot of chip deliveries.
It's going to keep the world happier. Yeah.
Okay. Turning to you, Claire, you've also had tremendous success with your company, Axonista. Can you tell us about that? It operates in a totally different sector, but equally successful, and you're expanding as well.
Yes, thank you, Martina. Good morning. I just want to say thank you, Scale Ireland, for hosting this event, and thank you to Tánaiste for attending, and also to Bobby for just having such an amazing, ambitious vision and being such a great supporter of the Irish startup ecosystem. It's really wonderful to see this vision. I think it's the future of delivery for sure. Now, I'm not sure the Tánaiste has ever bought anything from shopping channels like QVC, but live stream video shopping is an enormous market opportunity. And today it's worth about 130 billion in China alone. That market has doubled in size there last year, and we see this trend spreading west. We see online evolving from being a place to buy to being a place to shop. And we're the tech platform that enables live stream shopping. And we've been delivering this for global shopping channels like QVC, like HSN since 2015. So we are well positioned to build a market leading video commerce company from Ireland. And we were export focused from day one, particularly in the US market. And we found it in the last recession, which was in 2010. And now we see the market coming to us, and we're on track to double our revenue this year. So we're looking for strategic partners in that journey with us. And I want to just welcome the recommendations, particularly on EISS and exports from the Tánaiste today. We have been very much supported by Enterprise Ireland from day one, both at home and internationally. We came through the High Potential Startup Scheme. But I particularly also want to call out the Grad Start program, which has been really helpful in supporting the hiring of graduates.
Claire, also you are in an unusual situation and a very positive one at the moment, because during the pandemic you are in recruiting mode.
Yes, actually a number of factors came together just that were already happening in the market in terms of online commerce and video viewing, but have been accelerated by COVID-19. So yes, we are actively recruiting. We have currently 10 open roles on our website. They are roles in design, engineering, project management, operations. We've been an early adopter of remote working, and all of these roles are working from home anywhere in Ireland. So our newest member of the team is joining us from County Clare next week.
Thanks, Claire. And that's a positive story. I'm going to bring the Tánaiste in. Tánaiste, would you like to come in on some of the comments that Claire and Bobby have made? And maybe if you've ever had a drone delivery or intend to shop on QVC.
I haven't had a drone delivery yet, but I really love the idea. And I met separately with Bobby and his team a few weeks ago, and I'm totally sold on the idea. You know, I can really see how in 5, 10 years time, maybe even a shorter time period, that, you know, drone deliveries will be quite normal, you know. And I like the idea of the pizza arriving to my balcony and not me having to bother going downstairs or any of that. So I think it's really exciting, particularly at such a depressing time. It's really exciting and inspiring to hear from companies that are doing new things. And when you hear from them, you can really see what the future is going to look like, and it's going to look better. So it's just great for my morale, going from depressing meeting to depressing meeting to go to something like this and hear about some of the ideas from the future. I do buy a lot of stuff online, by the way, just not from QVC or any of the TV channels, but I know people who do. One thing that would be very useful, I think, for us, as we prepare the next budget, and Martina, you know this better than most from your involvement in politics. We kind of write the budget in September. So budget 2022 is really written in September, and that's only about 6-7 months away. So we want to reshape the EIS and make it more attractive for companies like yours. And we want to do something on capital gains tax, but we're quite limited in what we can do, because not everyone in the coalition is as enthusiastic about reducing taxes on businesses, I put it that way. But we do want to do something, particularly around in the entrepreneurship space. So if I'd say anything to Scale Ireland, if you can come up with what you think would work best and be targeted and be most effective in those two areas, like, I'm all ears. And getting that sooner rather than later is better, because it then allows me to engage with the tax strategy group and revenue and all the people who could find 7 reasons as to why we can't do it. The sooner I get it, the more I can find the 7 reasons why we can, if that makes any sense.
Well, first of all, we all welcome the positive comments this morning. And also, we have put in our submission on the EIS review that's being carried out by the Department of Finance in conjunction with our partners, it has to be said.
Don't just send it to them, though. Make sure it's sent to me as well.
Okay. We will indeed, Brian, very positive comments this morning from the Tánaiste in relation to a number of things. EIS, there was something there also on capital gains tax, but they're limited, but also as response to Bobby and Claire's success stories.
Yes, I think it's very encouraging to hear that more funds have been allocated to the Sustaining Enterprise Fund. The Tánaiste mentioned that companies that survive frequently thrive when the crisis is past. And the key thing is that they do survive, and sustaining enterprise. The Sustaining Enterprise Fund is very important in that respect. So I really welcome that. There have been some issues in terms of the accessibility of some of these schemes for some startup companies. So it would be great to make sure that we can continue to review those.
And that's very important. Also, Bobby, you were speaking there about scale-ups and the supports for them. Can I get your response also to what you've heard from the Tánaiste this morning?
Yeah, no, it's really encouraging. And, as Tánaiste said, we had met previously virtually to discuss our business, and, setting aside the cold hard cash and the way that helps businesses like ours, there's softer, more intangible supports that are equally important for companies like us. And, where we're in, regulated space and it's difficult to move things forward, being in a small market is extremely helpful. So the support that we've gotten, for example, from Enterprise Ireland, from HSE and from Tánaiste's department, just to move forward and to be able to do what we're doing is equally important. And that allows us, we're beating the biggest companies in the world that are trying to do this in the United States, but because we have the support, and in particular at the IAA, to allow us to move forward, we have a big advantage. So, but when you think about scaling up the business, that's when we run into difficulty. And when I ran Car Trawler, in the end, we were 600 people down in Dundrum. We found that there wasn't a level playing field between ourselves and FDI-backed companies. The advantages that FDI companies enjoyed were better than Indigenous tech companies. And that's why I, again, welcome finally Scale Ireland. And I was at the same meeting, Brian, you were, when that was said, that you guys don't have anybody organizing you. And we do now, so we have a voice now. And people like myself and Claire, we're in the background, as examples, as almost guinea pigs for what government's doing right and what government needs to work on, and Scale Ireland bring that voice, to yourself, Tánaiste, which I think is the best place we've been in decades. So I'm very, very happy.
And I know in terms of a drone delivery, would you trust the Tánaiste at the helm of one of your drones?
So
or maybe it's a test drive?
Let me just say, for all members of government, drone delivery is free. If you can get to earn more, we'd really love to have you there. And we don't just do chips, we also do fantastic coffee from Thomas & Co. All your pharmacy needs will be taken care of, and you can even get ice cream. So,
I know, Bobby, you didn't answer the question whether you would trust him at the controls.
They're not supposed to fly themselves, isn't that the point?
It's not something that I think I would put government in charge of. Technology is just, it's a step too far, but certainly we would let you stand close to the aircraft, Tánaiste, and I think you would enjoy the experience.
I do. I have that invitation from Bobby to get to Ardmore, and I'm dying to take you up on it. I haven't left Dublin since September, and
yeah, likewise.
Just dying to get out around the country and to see some businesses in action.
And also to Claire, your response to the Tánaiste comes this morning, and perhaps you could also persuade him to get on the shopping channels that you're providing the technology for.
Absolutely. But I mean, I welcome everything that the Tánaiste mentioned this morning. As Bobby was saying, like, we are the test cases for what's going right and what can be improved. I also feel like, Ireland can be the centre of excellence for so many things, and there's so much creativity happening here. From everything like remote working, there's some wonderful companies like Grow Remote, like are really focused on creating jobs in rural areas and working with scale-ups to do that. And Boundless, who are focused on solving that problem as well. And they're all really ambitious Irish companies. And I think that another thing that could be a competitive advantage for scaling companies is really the UN Sustainability Development Goals. They're something that I think, if we are scaling in a responsible way, in a green way, we can really be a market leader there too. So I'd love to see a more holistic approach on this and more discussion. And, I think Scale Ireland is just a wonderful body to have representing this area of the industry. There's so much potential here.
And before we go to questions, I want to make the point to Brian that we have Claire and Bobby, who are excellent examples of founders today. But there are many other successful founders that we could have had join us today. There are so many successful stories around the country.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also there's a very interesting contrast between Claire and Bobby. They're both incredibly ambitious entrepreneurs who are targeting very large markets with the ambition to grow their business very, very significantly. But Bobby has taken the route of, raising significant international and local capital. Claire has essentially bootstrapped her business and has got it to significant scale without material external capital, and that's an incredible achievement. But you're absolutely right. There are 2,000 companies in the space now. Many other tremendous entrepreneurs. A big worry for us in Scale Ireland right now is that while there are enormous amounts of capital available for later stage businesses, it's very difficult right now for early stage companies to raise capital, and we've seen significant declines in the numbers of new companies getting funded and the number of kind of smaller companies getting funded. So in that context, I particularly welcome the Tánaiste's comments in relation to reform of EIIS. I mean, I think that's an opportunity to develop a strong culture of angel investment in Ireland, and that would be tremendously welcome to kind of to plug that early stage gap.
And I think it's fair to say our submission will be landing in his mailbox soon.
Indeed, and I should mention that that's a submission not just from ourselves in Scale Ireland, but also from our partners in the Alliance for an Innovation-Driven Recovery. So Euronext Dublin, which is the Irish Stock Exchange, the Irish Venture Capital Association, HBAN, which is the Halo Business Angel Network, and Tech Ireland. So it's very, very broadly supported within the sector.
And we have some questions that have come in. The first one is from Gráinne O'Keefe from Ludgate Hub in Skibbereen. And actually, we've received questions from Cork to Dublin to from San Francisco-based companies. So all good this morning, and some of the issues have already been touched on. But Gráinne is asking the question on behalf of the Irish Tech Hub Network. And the question is, how can the government support tech hubs so they can better support startups? And we're, based here this morning in one of those hubs, Dogpatch Labs, and seeing the positive of what they're doing for startups. An Tánaiste, what would you say to that question from Gráinne O'Keefe from the Ludgate Hub in Skibbereen?
Yeah, well, I've been to Ludgate years ago. I was minister for something else at the time. I can't remember what it was, but it's an impressive setup, and I'm not sure if there's much more we can do for setups like Ludgate, which really are the model, I think, for other towns around the country. But in terms of what we're doing generally, I suppose first of all is capital grants and capital funding for enterprise hubs, and some of that will come through my department, but actually a lot of it's going to come through the rural department under Heather Humphreys, because we want to have these in towns and villages around the country. And the second thing really is the National Broadband Plan to accelerate that. It's a massive investment, €3 billion over 5 years, connecting every home, farm, business, town, village, townland in the country to fibre. And I'm keen to see if we can speed that up. I'm going to meet with NBI, the company that has the contract, in the next couple of weeks to see what we can do to accelerate that. Separate to that, there's the whole remote working strategy as well, which you'll know about. We will have the code of practice quite soon on the right to disconnect. We'll have the legislation on the right to request remote working, probably by the end of the year, early next year. And we've also set this target in government to lead by example. And while a lot of people are going to come back to the office will never be the same again. And we have a target to have about 20% of the public service either home working or blended working. So if you like, providing a customer base or a client base for a lot of those hubs around the country, it's the 21st century form of decentralization. I think it's not building a big headquarters in a provincial town. It's having people dispersed in small towns and villages all over the country and at home, and coming into the capital when they need to, but not every morning. So that's kind of what we are doing. But again, I'm here to hear ideas as well. So if there's something we're missing out on, don't be shy to tell me.
I'm actually going to go immediately to Bobby on that, because he will not be shy in telling you. Yeah. If in the morning you swapped offices, what would you do?
Yeah. So,
and I don't know if the Tánaiste would trust you at his office either.
No, and I wouldn't advise that to the Tánaiste either. So the most difficult thing for companies like myself and Claire's is hiring people. By far, our biggest challenge is getting and keeping people, and that is, even when I ran Car Trawler, I constantly lost people to FDI-backed companies that just had deeper pockets, and better ways to incentivize people than Indigenous companies do. So, the tool that we use obviously is salary, and that's a blunt instrument. But a better tool is stock options and stake in the game for employees. And when I run a business, like, there's 40 excited young engineers in my business now, and they're as excited about the mission of building the biggest company in the world as they are about their stock options. And when we see that Ireland has a poorer stock option regime than literally every entrepreneurial country in the world, that's disappointing. And I think that is the one space that I would go to firstly to help me hire.
When you say that, Bobby, do you mean the tax treatment thereof? Is that it?
Yeah.
That it's treated as income tax rather than capital gains?
Yeah, correct.
Do we not do something on that recently?
Yeah, for sure, but we're still behind
okay.
many other markets. Yeah, like I would.
We should aim to be competitive with the UK.
We should. I'd love to win. I would love for me to be hiring people in Israel or in the UK and saying, and if you come here, here's the way your options will pan out over the coming 5 years. Because these are high risk things. These aren't cash. These are things that they only work out if the company works out. And So yes, we've gone a long way, we've done a lot, but we're still at a disadvantage. And then the other part is, and we kind of already spoke about this, but I'm just so optimistic about the future because of what's going to happen after the pandemic, which is it's going to be normal and it's going to be viable for people that came from Portumna to stay in Portumna and have a great job with my company, connected and working just as well as if they're working in Dublin. And that does two things. One, it makes Portumna a vibrant town again. The local butcher, the local retailer that's been closing down, they're all going to thrive because I'm going to be hiring people and letting them live wherever they want to live. And MBI, national broadband, is key to that. But I'd love to also see some other way to structure transportation. There's a whole list of priorities that we need to get to support rural living. Rural connectivity is the first and obvious one, but for me, massively optimistic about what the aftermath of the pandemic is going to be.
And can I come in, Claire, because the retention and recruitment of staff is also an issue for you, and also share options, which John Kennedy of Think Business has also raised in his questions, along with that seed funding issue and capital gains tax. But in relation to the retention and recruitment staff, you also have a workforce that spreads several jurisdictions, so there's an added issue there.
Yeah, that is and it's a puzzle that you spend so much of your time trying to understand, when you should be spending your time building something really big and implementing your vision, and you just get tied up in knots trying to figure out what keep schemes are, how ESOPs are managed, all of that the stuff, and especially across jurisdictions, it makes it very limiting as an Irish company to be an employer in other jurisdictions too. And that's a very hard problem to solve. But one of the things that why we embraced remote working initially, and we have been a few years, is that we just could not compete with the FDIs here. And I'm based in Grand Canal Dock, surrounded by LinkedIn, Airbnb, Google, everything is like on my doorstep, and and it's just, you just can't compete with that size and the incentives that they can give. You can in other ways, and people have more of a hands-on element to the business rather than being sort of a cog in a large companies. But like when it comes to incentives, it's just very, very difficult to get your head around it as a startup founder. And try and navigate all of these different things that are available to you think, but you're not quite sure how to do. And I think another one we would call out would be probably the R&D tax credits, which I know that are a fantastic thing, but a lot of people just really don't know how to access them or how to use them.
And Tánaiste, many people are raising the fact that also some of the supports, there's the simplification of a process is needed. Brian, in terms of some of the supports that are needed, in terms of even EIS or other issues here, I know that have been risen in relation to the Keep scheme and so on.
Yes, certainly if you look at the R&D tax credits, which Claire mentioned, there are kind of two broad issues that we have raised. The first is that the R&D tax credits are paid out over 3 years. It would have a huge impact if they were paid upfront in the year in which they apply. And the second is, as Claire mentioned, there's a lot of startup companies actually don't use the R&D tax credit because it's perceived as just being too complex, So yeah, that's an area. And in fairness to the Tánaiste's department and the other departments involved, I think they are conscious of that and are working to ensure, a lot of money is spent on R&D tax credits. I think it's approximately 500 million a year, but something like 450 of that is going to kind of large companies, and in many cases, large FDI companies rather than small early stage Irish tech companies.
And by the way, for everyone out there, there are 500 people joining us on this webinar this morning. So this is a conversation that people are very strongly interested in and want to hear more about, and also the importance of Indigenous enterprise, and also, as Claire and Bobby were pointing out, Indigenous jobs. I am now going to hand over to Brian to conclude our meeting. Our first of the year, And I think it's our first of this type of meeting that we've ever held, and it has been a phenomenal success. And thank you to everyone. Brian.
Yes, thanks, Martina. I mean, I'm absolutely blown away by the number of people that we have signed up for the webinar and joining us today. So I think that does reflect, just how important this sector is and how engaged the community is in this sector. I'd like to thank the Tánaiste and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, Leo Varadkar, for joining us and for engaging so openly in the conversation and addressing some of the key issues that are facing the sector. I particularly welcome his comments in relation to reform of EIIS, in relation to the increased budget for the Sustaining Enterprise Fund. And I do want to acknowledge that there has been progress in relation to share options with the introduction of the Keep Share Option schemes. But there's definitely more we can do there, and we'll certainly engage with the Tánaiste in relation to that. So we look forward to continuing to engage on that issue and also on the other issues facing founders with the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, with the Department of Finance, of course, who hold the purse strings, and with Enterprise Ireland as we look towards recovery. I'd also like to thank Bobby and Claire McHugh for joining us, and our hosts, Patrick, and all the team at Dogpatch Labs, who've done a fantastic job on the technical side. So thank you to all of them. Thanks also to our partners in the sector. I already mentioned the other members of the Alliance for Innovation-Driven Recovery, but I'd also like to mention our partners in the wider European startup community, Allied for Startups and the European Startup Network. And I think just to go back to something that Claire mentioned, I think particularly in relation to share options, there's a really important place for a pan-European approach to addressing this problem, so that an Irish company can issue options to people in any European country based on a single scheme. That would be tremendously powerful, and it would be great to have the support of the Irish government in pursuing that particular agenda. Finally, and most importantly, I want to thank the Scale Ireland team, Sheila, Noel, Liz, and in particular, our marketing and communications lead, Luke, who's put in huge time and effort to make this an event a success. So thanks to Luke for all of his hard work. And of course, Martina, who has a very tough act to follow in Liz McCarthy, but has absolutely stepped up to the mark and has done a fantastic job since she joined. And finally, Dervla Meany of White Diamond Events, who has helped us with pulling this event together and jumped in at relatively short notice and has done a fantastic job. So thank you, Dervla. It's very impressive how smoothly everything has gone. And finally, thank you all for joining. I hope you've got something from the event, and we look forward to doing it again shortly.